Station, this is Houston. Are you ready for the event?
Houston Station is ready for the event.
University of Connecticut, this is Mission Control Houston. Please call station for a voice check.
Station, this is the University of Connecticut. How do you hear me?
University of Connecticut, the International Space Station hears you loud and clear.
Okay.
We have a professor here at UConn whose GM tomato seeds went to space on Discovery. Are there any crops grown in space or on the ISS? Any use of plants at all?
At this time, we do not have any crops on board the space station, but we have a cargo vehicle launching here in maybe today or tomorrow, and it promises to bring us some crops up, and we're going to actually start growing things up here. There have been some experiments in the past that have grown plants, but currently we do not have anything on board.
Have you experienced any changes in your perspective on life since being in space?
Yeah, I guess, being up here for a long period of time and seeing the Earth the way that we see it from so high above, you're definitely the way you think about the Earth, the way you think about the different countries, the way you think about different people definitely changes a little bit. So it definitely will have an effect on me for the rest of my life.
When you look out the window of the ISS, is there a favorite view you have?
Yeah, that's a good question. Every time you look out the window, you see something very beautiful. I have to say that my favorite views are the Caribbean. The waters in the Caribbean are just incredibly different shades of blue and teal. It's beautiful. The other thing I like to see is at night when we have lightning storms, especially it seems like the continent of Africa, they have some very big, severe lightning storms, thunder and lightning storms. And we could see the lightning flashing all over the continent, and it's just beautiful to see.
What made you choose electrical engineering as your major?
I think you asked, why did I select electrical engineering and computer science as my major? Back then, computers, personal computers were probably just starting to come on the market. So I knew that computers were going to be an important part of any type of engineering. So I wanted the computer science aspect of it. And, of course, I was always interested in electronics and electrical things. So that just kind of was a natural fit for me.
What advice would you give a current UConn student that wants to follow the same path as you and become an astronaut?
Yeah, that's a tough one. There's so many different paths to become an astronaut. There is no one easy path. We're like graduating as an engineer from the University of Connecticut, for example. You know the path you have to take. To become an astronaut, it's much more complicated, much more difficult. But the best advice I could give folks is find something that you enjoy. If you enjoy electrical engineering, for example, go get your undergraduate degree, get a master's, maybe even a PhD in that. Get a job working as an engineer in that field. Something that you enjoy, work on it for a few years, put in an application at NASA as an astronaut. Maybe come work at NASA. NASA has a lot of great jobs as engineers, flight controllers, scientists, technicians, all kinds of folks work at the Johnson Space Center and the other centers around the country. So find something you enjoy, become very good at it, of course, and then put your application in the hat and see what happens.
Is space anything like what science fiction portrays it to be?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Is space anything like what science fiction portrays it to be?
I'm sorry, I'm getting a little bit of echo. One more time.
Is space anything like science fiction portrays it to be?
Is space anything like science fiction portrays it to be?
Okay, I understand. Science fiction, yeah, no. It's nothing like science fiction. I've read a lot of science fiction books growing up and still do once in a while. in books and movies and things like that, things are very dramatic. Things happen very fast. You know, up here in space, we move kind of slow. You know, vehicles rendezvous and dock with each other very, very slowly. Things happen very slowly up here. They're not as dramatic. Of course, we have much better views than any graphics can in a movie can demonstrate or reproduce. So no, it's not really like science fiction up here, but we still get to do some pretty neat things, and we see some great. We get some great views out the window.
How did you move from becoming a flight controller to actually working on the shuttle and being sent into space?
Yeah, again, I worked as an engineer at NASA for a little while. I worked as an engineer up in Connecticut for a while. Then I worked as an engineer at NASA for a while, and I switched over and became a flight controller. And I worked about 2 or 3 years as a flight controller, and then got selected as an astronaut. Again, the path was really doing something I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed working as an engineer at NASA. I saw the flight controllers, and I thought their job was really neat, so I decided I wanted to become a flight controller. I became a flight controller for the space shuttle. I loved that job. That was a fantastic job. And again, I was just doing something I really enjoyed. I was pretty good at it. I put my name in the hat, and I was lucky enough to get selected.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the University of Connecticut portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute.
Station, this is Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. How do you hear me?
RPI, I hear you loud and clear. Welcome to the International Space Station.
Station, this is Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. All right. We got a great excited crowd here for you, and here's our first student.
Hi, Rick. This is Alex Angelella. I was wondering, what has been the most surprising result you've seen from an experiment in space, and what's the significance of conducting experiments in space?
Well, of course, you know, the International Space Station has been conducting experiments for 10 years now or more. I should say, yeah, 14 or 15 years almost since it began. But you know, we have a long way to go. We just completed the construction of the International Space Station a few years ago, and we just started getting to full-time operations where we're actually performing experiments around the clock. A lot of those results are not in yet. Some of these experiments are going to take a long time before we see the results and before they actually lead to something on the market. Some of the things I hear about, of course, we do some research on vaccines. I've heard that some of the space-based research that we're performing up here has led to a salmonella vaccine, which, of course, affects a lot of people on the Earth. So things like that is what we're shooting for, not only to help the folks on Earth, but also to further our exploration in the solar system, you know, move us on beyond low Earth orbit to the Moon and Mars. So we do research to push us beyond low Earth orbit, but we also do research to help the folks on the ground.
Thank you, Rick. My name is Emily, and what do you hear in space while on spacewalks?
Hi, Emily. Yeah, that's a really good question. You know, mostly what you hear is the humming of your suit. The suit has a fan and a pump, and it's constantly running, of course. And that's a very reassuring feeling, having that constant white noise sound. So that's the first thing you hear all the time. Of course, you hear voices as the ground's talking to you and your EVA partner's talking to you. But the neat thing is, you know, they say you can't hear anything in space. I can remember being in the Space Shuttle payload bay where I was attached to structure with a kind of like a handrail. It's called a BRT. It's like a clamp. And that was attached to my suit. And my spacewalking partner was kind of like clunking down the another handrail, and he was like plugging in a piece of hardware. And I could hear him as he's banging on the metal. Of course, that sound is being transmitted through the structure of the space shuttle through the structure of my suit, and I could hear it. So it's pretty neat to be able to hear things like that.
Thanks, Rick. My name is Chris Volk, and a question I was wondering was, even though you went through years of training to get into space, is there anything that surprised you when you finally got there?
Yes, you know, whenever you come up here, there's always something interesting and surprising. You know, my first mission was quite a while ago, And the beauty of the Earth, you know, it's amazing. You spend your whole life trying to get off the Earth, it seems like. And then as soon as you get into low Earth orbit, the first thing you do is turn around and look back at the Earth and see how beautiful it was, and you miss it almost instantly. So that was kind of surprising that you spend so much time looking at the Earth and just being amazed by its beauty. It's also really, you know, I wouldn't say it was surprising, but it sure is a lot of fun when you're up here and you're floating. And, you know, you can hang upside down. I used to hang upside down and eat my lunch just because I could. So things like that are just a blast to do while you're up here.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Cassandra Morales, and we were wondering what makes you most excited about the future of space exploration, perhaps visiting asteroids or going back to the moon or even Mars?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the thing that makes me the most excited is the fact that we have so many opportunities in the future, probably not too far away, hopefully in 5 or 10 years. We've got several commercial companies, I can't even count them, 4 or 5 different commercial companies building vehicles that are going to go into low Earth orbit. And so that's going to really open up the market for a lot of folks to visit up here into low Earth orbit and see the Earth and kind of experience the things that I get to experience. But then you also have NASA. On the other hand, you have NASA with the Orion vehicle that's going to go beyond low Earth orbit, go back to the moon or to an asteroid, and maybe eventually to Mars. So I think there's a lot of things on the horizon. It's been a little bit slow in terms of U.S. vehicles since the shuttle program has been shut down. But I think we're coming on strong with the commercial vehicles and with the Orion program. I think it's going to be a bright future here in a few years.
Hey, Rick. My name is Evan Kaiser. Are there any specific methods you use during spacewalks to minimize radiation exposure, and how do you factor in radiation as a concern?
Hey, Evan, yeah, we don't do anything to mitigate it, but the ground folks do. The ground folks look at our trajectory. They look at how much time we're going to spend out there on the spacewalk. They look at our total radiation exposure during our whole lifetime, our career as an astronaut. They look at all those factors, and they determine what the best time is for us to go outside. When's who does the spacewalks, for example, who even gets assigned to the missions. If you have too much radiation exposure in your career, you may not be able to do long-duration missions, for example. So the docs, on the flight doctors on the ground, they keep track of all that stuff, and they make sure that we stay below the protective limits, if you will.
Hey, Rick. My name is Ryan. Can you compare launching in the Soyuz rocket versus launching in the space shuttle?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I launched in the space shuttle. 3 space shuttle launches in the 1 Soyuz launch now. The space shuttle is an incredible vehicle. It just hops off the launch pad, and it basically is moving accelerates very quickly off the launch pad immediately. And its first stage is very bumpy. You know, I kind of the analogy I used in first stage of the space shuttle was kind of like if you rode a motorcycle down a train track. That's how bumpy it is. And then when you get into second stage of the space shuttle, it's very, very smooth. You can't even feel the engines, the rumble of the engines or the vibration. Very, very smooth. The Soyuz is quite a bit different. The Soyuz doesn't hop off the launch pad as fast. It doesn't accelerate off the launch pad as quickly as the space shuttle. It's a little bit smoother than first stage. But the thing that was really interesting in the Soyuz launch was when the staging of the rockets. I think it was second and third stage. The second stage shuts out, and you kind of get thrown out of your seat, and then the third stage lights, and you kind of get thrown back. Of course, you're strapped in very, very tightly, so you're not really getting thrown around, but you could feel that bump, if you will, and that was kind of a lot of fun. So they're quite a bit different, those vehicles, but both of them worked fantastic, and I would ride either one of them again.
Station, this is Houston ACR. That concludes the Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute portion of the event. Please stand by for a voice check from the University of Houston, Clear Lake.
Station, this is University of Houston, Clear Lake. How do you hear me?
University of Houston, Clear Lake. I hear you loud and clear. Welcome to the space station.
Thank you. This is Aaron Herridge, physics engineering major. And my question is, what experience at University of Houston, Clear Lake has helped you most in your activities up there on the space station?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, when I first moved to Houston, I was working as an engineer at the Johnson Space Center. and I decided I want to continue my education. Of course, University of Houston Clear Lake is a great place to go. It's a great campus, has lots of opportunities and different programs, and of course, very, very convenient, located right next to the Johnson Space Center. So I can't say that there's any specific experience that I got at the University of Houston Clear Lake, but I can say that, going there, meeting the folks, having that experience just in general of attending the school there and getting the degree, of course, getting that master's degree had a lot to do with me getting selected as an astronaut.
Matthew Smith, finance here. What would you say are the differences in preparing yourself for long-term weightlessness on the ISS versus short-term on a space shuttle mission?
Yeah, let's see. Long-term versus short-term. I really didn't prepare any differently. For short-term missions, basically you spend a lot of time at the gym before I launched. From a physical perspective, I spent a lot of time at the gym for my shuttle missions as well as my space station missions. I tried to be in as good a shape as I could before launch. And now the big difference is once you get up here. For space shuttle missions, I really didn't exercise while I was up here. I was up here for only 2 weeks, did a lot of spacewalks, so I thought that was enough exercise for me. But now, on a long-duration mission, I really spend a lot of time. Every day I work out for about 2 hours a day, running, biking, and lifting weights on a resistive exercise device. So pre-launch, not so much different in terms of physical preparation, but during the mission, that's when it's really quite a bit different.
Hi, my name is Ying Li, and my question is, have you ever any have you have any challenge working with other astronauts, particularly ones from other country?
Yeah, we have a lot of different astronauts from a lot of different countries. Right up here for example, now we have 3 Russian cosmonauts, we have 2 American astronauts, and our commander is a Japanese astronaut. Of course, we have European astronauts, Canadian astronauts. We have folks from all over the world, which is great. But, we don't see each other as people from different countries. We see each other just as crewmates. I don't think of Koichi Wakata, the Japanese astronaut, or my Russian crewmates. I don't think of them as Russians or as Japanese. I think of them as just my crewmates. So on a personal basis, we get along fantastically, and on a professional basis also. So again, those borders or those boundaries between or differences between people and differences between countries, they go away when you get up here and just work on a day-to-day basis with each other.
Hi, Rick. I'm Susan McIntyre, psychology major, and my daughter and I wanted to know if weightlessness had an effect on you, on your mood in space.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Yeah, it does. I think it does. I think it's not just the weightlessness. Of course, the weightlessness causes your body to change. When you first get up here, a lot of the blood, you have too much blood, basically too much fluid in your system, and your head gets kind of puffy. You feel kind of warm. You have maybe a little bit of a headache. It takes a little while for your body to adjust, maybe get rid of some of that fluid. And there's a lot of other changes your body's going through. So it takes time. It actually takes months maybe to fully adjust to weightlessness. But then there's also environmental factors. The CO2 level up here is higher than what we're used to on Earth. The noise factor, the close quarters, things like that. There's a lot of different things that affect your mood. But it's overall, most of that is overcome by the fantastic views we have out the Earth and the fact that we could float around and we do a lot of exciting work up here. So it's actually a pretty good trade-off.
Hi, this is Marvin Childress, College of Education. I was wondering, what actions can we take as citizens to help advocate for the International Space Station research, as well as other space exploration efforts?
Yeah, that's a good question. Of course, we're always looking for the folks to support us. NASA has lots of outreach programs to try to educate the general public about what we do up here and try to get folks excited, try to get youngsters excited about math, science, and technologies to promote the sciences and get kids into to study these things. I think the average person, of course, can show their support for NASA in a lot of different ways. Probably it depends on how far you want to go. Of course, talking to your elected officials, those are the folks who make the decisions on how much money NASA gets. Those are the folks who make the decisions on the things that we do up here, what programs survive, what programs get canceled, things like that. So I think talking to the elected officials is the best way to show your support for NASA.
Thank you, Rick. Go Hawks.
Station, this is Houston ACR. Thank you. That concludes our event.
Thanks.